Hello, I'm SA, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin. The ticker tape machine, in the early decades of the 20th century, was a device of mesmerizing power. It spooled out a relentless stream of letters and numbers, a cryptic language of fortune and ruin that held the public imagination captive. This paper ribbon represented the pulse of American capitalism, yet its fluctuations were governed less by economic reality and more by the whims of powerful syndicates, the whispers of insiders, and the raw, untutored emotions of a crowd. Wall Street in this era operated within an ecosystem of profound informational asymmetry, an arena where corporate disclosures were sparse and often misleading, and where the line between strategic participation and pure chance was perilously thin. The dominant ethos was one of movement and momentum. The value of a stock certificate was perceived to lie in its potential for rapid appreciation, its ability to be sold to someone else at a higher price tomorrow. The company itself, the physical entity of factories, assets, and employees, was a distant abstraction. This entire edifice of speculative fervor, built on a foundation of rumor and leverage, reached its predictable and catastrophic conclusion in the autumn of 1929. The Great Crash was a financial calamity, and it was also an intellectual one. It exposed the complete vacuity of the methods that had passed for financial wisdom. The system had failed because it possessed almost no system at all. It was a grand casino operating under the guise of an efficient market, and when the panic came, there were no intellectual anchors, no established principles of valuation to which an investor could cling. The crisis laid bare a fundamental need, a coherent, verifiable, and repeatable methodology for assessing the worth of a business enterprise, and by extension, the securities it issued. The world of finance required a grammar, a logic, a framework for converting the raw data of commerce into the applied science of valuation. Into this intellectual void stepped Benjamin Graham, a man of formidable intellect and classical education from Columbia University. Graham possessed a mind uniquely suited to the task. He viewed the chaos of the market with the dispassionate eye of a scholar, seeking underlying principles where others saw only random noise. His experience was intensely practical, having navigated the treacherous markets before, during, and after the crash. This fusion of scholarly rigor and real-world seasoning produced a revolutionary impulse to transform the art of speculation into the profession of investment analysis. He embarked on a quest to build a rational framework for deploying capital, an endeavor that would culminate in the creation of an entirely new academic and professional discipline. His first and most crucial contribution, developed in his lectures at Columbia and codified in the seminal 1934 text Security Analysis, co-authored with David Dodd, was to erect a clear and unambiguous partition between two fundamentally different activities, investment and speculation. Graham's definition of investment became the bedrock of his entire philosophy, a statement of profound consequence. An investment operation, he wrote, is one which, upon thorough analysis, promises safety of principle and an adequate return. Every component of this definition was load-bearing. Thorough analysis implied a deep, quantitative, and qualitative examination of the business, its competitive position, its management, and most critically, its financial statements. It demanded work, diligence, and the mustering of evidence. Safety of principle established a primary objective of capital preservation, a defensive posture that stood in stark opposition to the era's obsession with aggressive gains. Finally, adequate return suggested a reasonable, satisfactory profit, a goal aligned with business-like enterprise rather than lottery-like winnings. Any operation failing to meet these three rigorous criteria was, by his classification, speculation. By forging this definition, Graham performed an act of profound intellectual clarification. He gave market participants a vocabulary and a conceptual tool to understand their own actions and motivations. An individual buying a stock because its price was rising was a speculator. An individual buying a stock after calculating its long-term earning power and comparing that to its price was an investor. This distinction provided the ethical and intellectual cornerstone for a new profession. It gave the serious practitioner a standard against which all actions could be measured. From this foundational definition, Graham proceeded to build the machinery of analysis. He directed the aspiring analyst's attention away from the hypnotic dance of the ticker tape and toward the dense, sober pages of corporate balance sheets and income statements. He understood that these documents, while imperfect and sometimes manipulated, were the closest available approximation of economic truth. He pioneered techniques for reading them with a critical, almost forensic, skepticism. He taught his students to calculate liquidity ratios, to scrutinize debt levels, and to understand the quality of reported earnings. His most significant analytical innovation in this domain was the concept of normalized earning power. Graham recognized that the profits of any single year could be wildly misleading, distorted by the temporary boom or bust of the wider economic cycle. To arrive at a more stable and reliable measure of a company's value, he advocated for averaging its earnings over a period of several years, typically 7 to 10. This process, a simple statistical smoothing, had a powerful effect. It filtered out the short-term volatility and revealed a more durable picture of the company's underlying profitability. By basing valuation on this normalized figure, an investor could develop a sense of a business's intrinsic value that was independent of the market's fleeting sentiment or the current phase of the economic cycle. It was a method for seeing the long-term signal through the short-term noise. The intellectual architecture Graham constructed in these years provided the blueprint for the modern investment world. The entire field of security analysis, the professional credential of the chartered financial analyst, and the core curricula of university finance programs all descend directly from his initial framework. He established the very idea that a security's price and its underlying value were distinct concepts, and that the gap between them could be identified and exploited through diligent, rational inquiry. He armed the investor with a purpose, a definition, and a set of tools, transforming the chaotic marketplace into a field of study, a laboratory where principles of value could be systematically applied. This was his first, and perhaps most essential, revolution, the establishment of a rational creed for capital. With this new discipline established, the investor faced two colossal adversaries, enemies born from the very structure of human cognition and the nature of reality itself. The first was internal, the psychological pressure of the crowd, the primal, contagious waves of fear and greed that sweep through markets and obliterate the most carefully laid plans. The second was external, the profound, irreducible uncertainty of the future, a fog through which even the most powerful analytical light can penetrate only so far. A rational creed for capital required a psychological defense and a practical bulwark. Benjamin Graham's genius lay in formulating elegant, powerful solutions for both. His response to the challenge of market psychology was an allegory. His answer to the problem of uncertainty was an arithmetic of prudence. To master the emotional chaos of the market, Graham introduced one of the most enduring personifications in financial literature, the parable of Mr. Market. He asked his students and readers to imagine owning a share in a private business, but having a most peculiar partner. This partner, Mr. Market, is a creature of extreme emotional volatility. Every day he appears and without fail offers a price at which he will either buy your interest or sell you more of his. The defining characteristic of this partner is his bipolar temperament. On some days, seized by boundless optimism and euphoria, he quotes a ridiculously high price, seeing only a glorious future for the business. On other days, plunged into inconsolable despair and panic, he offers to sell his shares for a pittance, convinced that ruin is imminent. The brilliance of this construction is its immediate reframing of the investor's relationship with market prices. The daily stock quotation ceases to be an objective verdict on value delivered by an omniscient entity. It becomes the manic or depressive babbling of an unstable but useful associate. Mr. Market is there to serve you, to present you with opportunities. His mood swings are his problem, a resource for you to exploit. You are free to ignore his daily offerings entirely. You are under no obligation to transact with him. Your own independent and carefully researched assessment of the business's value is your sole guide. When his pessimism drives his asking price far below your calculation of intrinsic worth, you have an opportunity to buy. When his wild enthusiasm leads him to offer a price far above your own valuation, you have an opportunity to sell. At all other times, you can simply ignore him, tend to your business, and wait for his emotional state to create another opportunity. This allegory is a profound psychological tool for enforcing discipline. It creates a critical detachment between the investor's judgment and the market's fleeting sentiment. By personifying the market's irrationality, Graham made it something external, something to be observed and handled, rather than an internal feeling to be swept up in. The investor's task becomes clear. One must possess a firm grasp of the business's value, and one must possess the emotional fortitude to treat Mr. Market as a servant, never as a master. This mental model inoculates the investor against the contagion of crowd behavior. It provides a simple, memorable narrative to counter the powerful, often destructive narratives of boom and bust. It is a shield of reason against the siren call of speculation. Having armed the investor with a psychological defense, Graham then turned to the practical problem of an uncertain world. Even the most disciplined analyst, immune to Mr. Market's charms, can make mistakes. Businesses face unforeseen competition. Economies enter unexpected recessions, and global events can upend the most stable industries. The future is a realm of probabilities, always containing the possibility of surprise. The investor's primary task, in Graham's view, was the preservation of capital. To achieve this, he articulated his single most important principle, the three most important words in value investing: margin of safety. The concept is, on its face, a model of simplicity, yet its implications are deep and far-reaching. The margin of safety is the favorable difference between the price at which a security is purchased and the conservatively estimated value of that security. It is a buffer, a cushion against the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune and the fallibility of human analysis. If you calculate a company's intrinsic value to be $1 per share, you would seek to purchase it at a significant discount, perhaps at 50 or 60 cents. That 40 or 50 cent gap is the margin of safety. Its function is twofold. First and foremost, it is a defensive measure. Should your analysis prove to be slightly optimistic, or should the business encounter moderate headwinds you failed to anticipate, the discount provides protection against a permanent loss of capital. The initial cheapness of the purchase absorbs a degree of error or bad luck. It is the financial equivalent of an engineer designing a bridge to withstand a load of 30 tons when the heaviest vehicle expected to cross is 10 tons. The extra capacity is the margin of safety, ensuring integrity against unforeseen stresses. Second, this buffer is the ultimate source of investment returns. When an asset is purchased at a substantial discount to its value, any future convergence of price and value will necessarily produce an attractive profit. The return is generated at the moment of purchase, baked into the transaction itself. The subsequent holding period is a process of waiting for the market, in one of its more lucid moments, to recognize the value that was there all along. This shifts the entire investment paradigm. The focus moves away from forecasting future growth or predicting market direction, activities fraught with uncertainty. It lands squarely on a more controllable and verifiable task, calculating a conservative value for a business today and patiently waiting for a price that offers a substantial discount. Together, the allegory of Mr. Market and the principle of the margin of safety form the operational heart of Graham's philosophy. They are a perfectly interlocking system. The margin of safety provides the quantitative target, defining what constitutes a true investment opportunity. Mr. Market provides the psychological framework, explaining how and when such opportunities arise from the emotional excesses of others. One is the mathematics of prudence, the other is the psychology of patience. They empower the investor to navigate the turbulent waters of finance with a clear map of value and a compass of emotional discipline, awaiting the moment when the manic-depressive tide recedes, revealing the treasures of undervalued assets lying on the seafloor. A philosophy constructed from such powerful axioms demanded a crucible for its validation. An intellectual framework, however elegant, achieves its ultimate meaning through application. For Benjamin Graham, this translation from principle to practice unfolded across two distinct yet deeply interconnected domains: the demanding results-oriented world of his investment partnership and the clarifying pedagogical realm of his writing and teaching. His ideas were first hammered into shape on the anvil of the real-world marketplace, and then distilled into a permanent, transmissible body of knowledge for generations to follow. The primary laboratory for these experiments in value was the Graham-Newman Corporation. This investment fund was the engine room where the theoretical blueprints of margin of safety and the behavioral insights of Mr. Market were converted into tangible financial returns. The firm operated as a systematic vehicle for uncovering and exploiting discrepancies between price and value, employing a range of strategies that were almost exclusively quantitative and dispassionate. Foremost among these, and perhaps the purest distillation of his entire philosophy, was the strategy of investing in what he termed net working capital stocks. This approach represents the margin of safety in its most extreme and empirically verifiable form. The calculation was severe in its conservatism. An analyst would begin with a company's current assets, cash, marketable securities and inventories. From this figure, one would subtract the company's total liabilities, encompassing everything from short-term accounts payable to long-term bonds. The resulting figure was the net current asset value, a rough approximation of the company's liquidation value if its operations were to cease immediately. Graham's rule was to purchase shares only when the market price was at a profound discount to this figure, typically 2/3 or less. This created a situation of extraordinary analytical comfort. An investor was essentially purchasing $1 of liquid assets for 50 or 60 cents. This method, later famously described by his student Warren Buffett as picking up a cigar butt, involved finding discarded, unloved businesses that had one good puff of value left in them. The appeal was its stark mathematical clarity. The future prospects of the business, its management quality, its competitive position, all the nebulous factors that preoccupy most market participants were rendered almost secondary. The investor, by purchasing the stock for less than its cash-like value, was acquiring the company's ongoing business operations, including its plants, equipment and brand equity, for less than zero. The margin of safety was immense, a bulwark against the uncertainties of the future, and the vagaries of corporate performance. The Graham-Newman partnership became a machine for systematically identifying these statistical bargains across the entire market, assembling a diversified portfolio of them and waiting patiently for their value to be recognized. This successful application of his theories in the unforgiving arena of Wall Street created a powerful intellectual gravity. The demand for his system of thought grew, and Graham, a natural educator, found his second great calling as a professor at Columbia Business School. Here, he undertook the monumental task of codifying his life's work, resulting in two seminal texts that, while originating from the same core philosophy, were designed for entirely different purposes and audiences. The first, Security Analysis, published with David Dodd in 1934, was the foundational scripture of a new profession. It is a work of immense scope and intellectual rigor, an encyclopedic treatise that sought to establish investment as a field grounded in evidence and systematic procedure. Its pages are filled with detailed methodologies for dissecting balance sheets, analyzing income statements, and valuing every conceivable type of financial instrument, from common stocks to the most obscure corporate bonds and preferred issues. Security Analysis was the comprehensive technical manual, the graduate-level textbook intended to train a professional cadre of analysts. Its purpose was to equip the serious practitioner with the tools necessary to perform a thorough, independent valuation of any business, thereby transforming the craft from a game of hunches into a discipline of diligent investigation. 15 years later, Graham produced a masterpiece of a different kind. The Intelligent Investor, first published in 1949, is a book of wisdom. Where Security Analysis provides the technical toolkit, The Intelligent Investor provides the operating philosophy and the psychological constitution. It is Graham's great gift to the layperson, a guide to developing the temperament required for long-term success. The book's enduring genius lies in its central clarifying distinction between two types of investors, the defensive and the enterprising. The defensive investor, as Graham defined him, is one whose primary goal is safety of principle and freedom from the constant need to make complex decisions. For this individual, Graham prescribed a simple, almost automatic policy. It involved maintaining a permanent allocation between high-grade bonds and a diversified list of common stocks, perhaps a 50-50 split, with periodic rebalancing. The stock portion would be composed of shares in large, prominent, and conservatively financed corporations with a long, uninterrupted history of dividend payments. Crucially, the defensive investor would only purchase these stocks when they were available at a reasonable price, defined by strict metrics like a modest price-to-earnings ratio. The entire strategy was designed for resilience and simplicity, a fortress against both market turmoil and the investor's own emotional impulses. The enterprising investor, by contrast, is one willing and able to devote significant time, skill, and effort to the study of securities. This path offers the possibility of superior returns, but it demands commensurate work. For Graham, enterprising had a specific meaning, a world away from speculation. It meant performing the deep quantitative work of security analysis. It might involve finding large, temporarily unpopular companies, or seeking out the classic bargain issues, like the nets his own firm specialized in. It could also involve participating in more complex special situations, such as liquidations or merger arbitrages. The key was that the enterprising activities were grounded in research and calculation, leveraging the investor's own diligence to uncover value that was hidden from the less industrious. By creating this framework, Graham achieved something remarkable. He made his philosophy accessible and actionable for anyone, regardless of their level of financial expertise or the amount of time they could commit. He provided a safe and prudent path for the ordinary saver, while simultaneously outlining the rigorous standards required for those who wish to achieve extraordinary results. Through his firm, he demonstrated that his principles could generate wealth. Through his writings, he created both the exhaustive professional manual and the timeless guide to investment wisdom, arming his followers with the intellectual machinery and the operational discipline to navigate financial markets with rationality and confidence. He had built the system and published the instructions. All that remained was to observe its effect when placed in the hands of others. The question of any great intellectual system's validity hinges upon its replicability. For Graham's carefully constructed edifice of value investing to stand as a genuine discipline, its principles would have to yield success for practitioners beyond its architect. The financial world is littered with the brief, spectacular careers of charismatic figures whose methods prove entirely idiosyncratic, their genius a phenomenon impossible to distill or transfer. Was Graham's profound success a similar case, a product of his singular intellect, operating within the peculiar market cycles of the mid-20th century? Or had he truly codified a durable, teachable methodology for achieving superior investment returns? The answer to this query, the ultimate empirical test of his life's work, would emerge decades later from the very lecture hall at Columbia University, where he had first articulated his philosophy. The definitive proof arrived in 1984, delivered by his most famous student, Warren Buffett. In a speech that would become the canonical essay, The Super Investors of Graham and Doddsville, Buffett presented a powerful, almost legally airtight case for the value investing paradigm. He began by framing the argument of his intellectual opponents, the proponents of the efficient market hypothesis. This academic theory posited that stock prices at all times reflect all available information, making it impossible for anyone to consistently outperform the market averages through analysis. Any investor who did so was the beneficiary of pure luck, a statistical outlier in a grand game of chance. Buffett illustrated this with a vivid thought experiment, a national coin-flipping contest involving all 225 million Americans. Each day, those who call the toss incorrectly are eliminated. After 20 days, a mere 215 contestants would remain, each having correctly predicted 20 consecutive coin flips. These winners, hailed as financial wizards, would write books and go on lecture tours, their success attributed to unique skill. Yet, as Buffett explained, with a large enough starting population, their existence is a statistical certainty, a product of random distribution. Then came the intellectual pivot. Buffett asked his audience to consider a crucial detail. What if all 215 winners came from a single tiny village in Nebraska? The immediate, logical inference would be that something was happening in that village. Perhaps it was diet, or training, or some shared insight. Chance would be discarded as a plausible explanation. This, he declared, was precisely the situation with a particular group of astoundingly successful investors. They all hailed from the same intellectual village, Graham and Doddsville. They were the students and employees of Benjamin Graham. Buffett proceeded to lay out the evidence, detailing the audited, long-term performance records of several of Graham's disciples. The results were staggering. He presented Walter Schloss, who ran an investment partnership from 1956 to 2002. Schloss was a purist, a practitioner of what some called cigar butt investing. He would buy hundreds of deeply depressed stocks, often trading for less than their net working capital, seeking one final, free puff of profit. His approach was almost purely quantitative, a direct application of Graham's earliest, most mechanical techniques. Over decades, his compound annual return was approximately 20%, vastly exceeding the market's performance. He then showcased Tom Knapp and Ed Anderson of the Tweedy-Brown partnership, who followed a similar, deeply quantitative approach, achieving decades of market-beating results. He presented Bill Ruane, whom Graham himself had recommended to investors when he retired. Ruane's Sequoia Fund applied the core philosophy with a different emphasis, focusing on a more concentrated portfolio of higher-quality businesses he could understand intimately. Despite this stylistic variation, Ruane also produced a record of profound long-term outperformance. The list continued, each investor with a unique portfolio, a distinct personality, and a different operational style. Some bought foreign stocks, others domestic. Some held concentrated positions, others were widely diversified. Some focused on statistical bargains, others on well-managed franchises. The common thread connecting these disparate individuals was their shared intellectual ancestry. Every one of them conceptualized a stock as a fractional ownership of a business. Every one of them viewed the market as the manic-depressive Mr. Market, a servant to be exploited rather than a master to be followed. And every single one of them operated with a deep-seated belief in the principle of the margin of safety, always demanding a significant discount between the price they paid and the underlying value they calculated. Their collective success, spanning different market environments and executed with varied personal styles, amounted to a powerful empirical refutation of the idea that their performance was luck. It was the validation Graham's system required. It demonstrated that value investing was a robust, flexible, and most importantly, teachable framework for rational decision-making under uncertainty. Graham's final and most enduring legacy, therefore, is the imposition of a scientific epistemology upon the chaotic world of investment. He accomplished a monumental intellectual shift, transforming the practice from a speculative art driven by rumor, emotion, and intuition into a rigorous discipline demanding evidence, logic, and emotional fortitude. His work provided the field with its essential intellectual toolkit, a method of inquiry grounded in verifiable facts found in financial statements, a logical process of valuation to translate those facts into an estimate of intrinsic worth, and a crucial operational principle, the margin of safety, to protect against the fallibility of human calculation and the vicissitudes of fortune. Ultimately, Graham bequeathed a specific temperament, a rational and psychological framework that insulates the practitioner from the twin follies of fear and greed. The allegory of Mr. Market is a profound psychological device, a mental model that reframes market volatility from a source of anxiety into a source of opportunity. The insistence on a margin of safety is an act of profound intellectual humility, an acknowledgement that the future is unknowable and that prudence is the highest virtue. He taught that success in investing stems from a sound intellectual framework for making decisions and the ability to keep emotions from corroding that framework. Markets will change, companies will rise and fall, and economic cycles will turn. The specific numbers on a balance sheet will evolve with accounting standards and industrial paradigms. Yet the fundamental constants of his universe remain. The periodic divergence of price from value is an enduring feature of financial markets, and the human behaviors that create these divergences are an immutable part of our nature. As long as these conditions persist, the rational, evidence-based, and temperamentally grounded philosophy of Benjamin Graham will remain the definitive guide for navigating the complexities of the financial world with wisdom and success.
We really appreciate you tuning in to this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.